So the stream will restart momentarily because I forgot to optimize for the optimization stream. So give me 1 second. Welcome to the... Actually, before I start, I should probably tell you that before the stream starts, I'll be turning off alerts. And I'll also be turning... I won't be looking at the chat as much, but I will have it open on the side over here, and I will be looking at it momentarily just in case there's something important. I do have a couple of people that are gonna tell me when there's something important I should be taking a look at. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Shumatsu, for the reminder. So I'll turn off the overlay now. Let's see. I keep the chat open. Let's see. A couple more things before we start. I will be linking the slides. I will be linking the slides in a drive link at the end of the stream. I'll be linking it both in the I'll be linking it both in the VTuber server. I'll be linking it on Twitter. I'll be putting it on. I'll be putting it at the description in the VOD. I'll also be putting it on the UTALIVE server under my channel. And this will also be uploaded on YouTube after maybe like a day. I think it's like a day or two for the affiliate thing, right? Yeah, so like after a day or two, I will be uploading it on YouTube. And it will be slightly edited so that it will be a little bit more easy to digest as a tutorial. I think that should be it for before we start. Thank you for joining us today. You people sitting in back, there's plenty of room up front. Why don't you move up front? Don't be shy. It'll be easier to hear because our audio gear is kind of low budget. Alright, let's see. Let's start. Thank you for joining us today. Move on to the next slide. Hope you like my graphic design. The first question to ask is, do you need to optimize? Well, the first thing you want to think about is, do you need to optimize? Even if you have a really beefy PC, you might be running into one of these issues. Is your stream stuttering? Are your games or programs running poorly? Do you have low stream quality? If you look in the bottom right here, is an example of what a low quality stream looks like. Like when I stream Apex and forget to optimize for Apex and everything looks like a blurry, smudgy mess. That is an example of poor stream quality. And if it's bad enough, your stream will start to disconnect. If any of these things happen to you, then you need to optimize. So I will be going over, in this seminar, I'll be going over the tools you use to analyze your bottlenecks. I'll explain what bottleneck is later. You'll analyze, figure out where exactly is my computer slowing down and making my stream really choppy or ugly, right? Because if you don't know what's causing it, it's hard to fix it, right? I'm gonna go into typically how a game renders a frame, and typically how OBS renders a frame is roughly the same. It's gonna be a very simple explanation. And the reason why I want to go over that is because it's important to understand overall how the process works so you know how to optimize and where to optimize. I'm gonna go into the first step in optimization. I'm gonna explain CPU versus GPU bottlenecks. I'm gonna tell you how to tailor an optimization per game. I'm gonna show you my encoding settings and encoding setting examples. I'm gonna try to talk about some of the common programs that will unoptimize your stream and make it really slow, aka Chrome. And then I'll try to go over some common problems I've had before related to, and the common problems will tie into the previous parts. I'll do a live demo on another machine that's connected by a capture card to this machine. So, and I haven't optimized that machine yet. Like, it's basically an almost fresh install of Windows 10. It's a fresh install of Windows 10, a fresh install of Apex Legends, and a fresh install of OBS. And I picked Apex Legends because it's a particularly difficult game to optimize, and I have not optimized streaming for that machine yet. You'll get to watch me struggle live as I demonstrate how I would go about optimizing the game for that machine. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So prepared questions for the VTuber server, and I'll actually be looking at chat for that one. Looks like our first thing to talk about is our analysis tools, or actually this thing is out of order. So let's go into rendering a frame first. I actually messed up my order for my slides, but that's fine. The most common, so this is how your computer renders a frame, right? Your CPU has to do some stuff, and your GPU has to do some stuff. And both of those things need to be done to finish rendering this very sad frame. And this is the most common misconception that most people don't understand about game game and OBS rendering. Your CPU doesn't do everything, your GPU doesn't do everything. They both do something. They both have to be done, right? They both have to be done to finish rendering the frame. This is a very simplified visualization, but basically you have a frame and you have, let's say, 10 to 20% of the tasks have to be done by the CPU and 80% of it have to be done by the GPU. Both of those have to be done before the frame can be output to your screen. Basically, the frame goes, all right, here's something I need the CPU to do. Here's something I need the GPU to do. They're not going to be equal, and the frame's going to go, all right, now finish your stuff. And when you're done, let me know, like tap me on my shoulder. And then when the CPU and the GPU are done, that's when the frame gets rendered. The consequence of this is that if the CPU is slower, then the frame takes as long as to render as the CPU. If the GPU is slower, then the frame takes as long to render as the GPU. It will always be the slowest of the two. That is a gross oversimplification of how a game and OBS renders a frame. It's pretty similar, but it's important to understand that both the CPU and the GPU have things to do to render the frame. If you want to look into this more yourself, you can search, you can Google for game thread versus rendering thread, and but that's outside the scope of this seminar. So what is the first step to optimizing your OBS for streaming? What is the first step? Can you guys guess what the first step is? Can you guys guess what the first step is? The first step is to stop using Streamlabs. Like, this is not a joke. this is not a joke. If you're here to optimize your stream for performance reasons, you want to immediately start by using the most performant OBS version you have, right? In my experience, Streamlabs uses 5 to 20% more CPU than OBS Studio. It's not a problem that more RAM will solve. It's not a problem that more GPU will solve. It is a problem that you need a better CPU for. But CPU usage is relative. It depends on what you're doing, right? And this is free. Switching to OBS Studio is free. So this is literally the first step. You want to stop using Streamlabs, and I don't know about Stream Elements. I haven't used Stream Elements, but you want to start using OBS Studio instead of Streamlabs, because if your goal is to squeeze as much performance out of your stream as possible, then you want to use a more performant version of OBS, and that is OBS Studio. If you want to access the Streamlabs widgets, you can still access those from the website dashboard, and you can access them as browser sources. That's actually what I did, and then I realized the Streamlabs chat is always broken, so I'm switching over to Stream Elements very soon. That is the first step. Stop using Streamlabs and start using OBS Studio. I want to go into some analysis tools. So the first step to optimizing your stream is to be able to see what you're doing in the first place. So you need to be able to watch OBS and see how many frames you're skipping and how much CPU you're using and stuff. There's only really two tools you really need for this. And the first one is OBS Stats. The way you access OBS Stats is you go to Docs in your OBS window, you click on Stats, and it'll pop up a little window that looks like this on the right. And there's a lot of information here, but the only information you really need to watch is the FPS, the frames missed due to rendering lag. So the first number is how many frames you're rendering, and on the right is how many total frames you rendered. And the bottom one is right under that is skip frame due to encoding lag. That is 0 and 0. What OBS does is it tries to keep track of your game and your overlay, right? That is the rendering. It tries to render an overlay and your game, or it keeps track of your game, then actually render a game itself. It goes and looks at the overlay. Okay, how many frames am I dropping in my overlay rendering? And then the second one, it goes, all right, now I need to convert these frames into a format that Twitch can accept. And those are two different processes, and it keeps track of how many frames you're basically unable to render due to both of these processes. So you want to watch the first number on both of the frames skipped due to rendering lag, as well as skip frame due to encoding lag, and it will give you a little convenient percent on the right here. It also gives you a nice little CPU usage percentage here, but I don't really use this. I prefer using Task Manager. So you can open this using Docs, and then you check Stats, and you can dock it in your OBS window. I always have it open. Someone asked earlier in the ENVTubers server, is there a way to check my stream performance and bandwidth before going live? This is how you do it. A little word of note is that you have to start recording before it will try to encode anything, but you'll be able to see rendering lag no matter, as long as you have OBS open. And if it's going a little bit fast for you, don't worry about it. I will demonstrate this again in the live demo section of the seminar. As I said before, I'll also be uploading these slides so you can take a look at it yourself. Analysis Task Manager. Everyone should know how to use this already. So once again, if you don't know how to use it, I don't know how you manage to be streaming. But if you don't know how to use it, I'll be demonstrating how I open up Task Manager. And then the only thing you have to watch is you go to the Processes tab and you watch the CPU and the GPU usage. You basically just want to see which one has more resources, and so to pick your correct encoder and stuff. That's all you have to do. And then sometimes in here you can see which programs are using up a bunch of CPU or GPU. In this case, Chrome is using way too much because I was watching like 6 streams or something. But yeah, you can watch for rogue programs here, very, very basic stuff. But this tab right here and this tab right here, the CPU and GPU usage, that's all you need to watch. So I want to talk about CPU versus GPU. Remember when I mentioned earlier that both the CPU and the GPU have to do things to finish rendering the frame. The consequence of that is because frames are going to vary. The tasks you have to, like the things the CPU have to do and the things the GPU have to do are going to vary from program to program, vary from overlay to overlay, vary from system to system, and vary from settings to settings. So this means that they're not going to be perfectly matched. One is always going to be slower than the other. Your goal is to try to match them as closely as you can based on your use case. Try to like make sure one is not slowing down, the other one is slowing down all your rendering. Little tip is that most recent games try to be GPU bound. There's a couple of reasons for this. I should probably explain what GPU bound is first, huh? So GPU bound just means that generally the game will have more things for the GPU to do, and the GPU will be slower than the CPU. And the reason for that, why most recent games do that, is because people tend to upgrade their GPUs more often. GPU settings are easier to scale down. GPU rendering stuff tends to be easier to parallelize, which means it's more scalable. And a lot of things are that you do on the GPU are cosmetic. So it's easy to turn them off to make it take less time to render on GPU. Whereas a lot of the stuff the CPU does is stuff like this bullet hit this character at this moment in time, or is this character moving at the correct speed? Is this character cheating? Like, is this player cheating? The CPU tends to do stuff that's very important for gameplay. It also sort of tells the GPU what to do. Most recent games, actually most games, try to be GPU bound. It's just that recent games is more apparent because older games are so easy to render that it becomes CPU bound. That's a little tip that's useful to know. So you're likely gonna need to optimize to use less GPU for your encoder, but it depends on the system. So on the bottom right here, you can see this. You can see like right here, I'm looking at it. In the output settings of OBS, there are 2 options for encoder. I prefer the advanced setting because it gives you a lot more options that you would like to have to optimize. So I'll be showing you the settings in advanced mode. But basically, if you're using an NVIDIA GPU, you have the option of NVIDIA NVENC, and you have the option of X264. And if you're using an AMD GPU, you'll have the option of, I think it's called AMD VCE. I don't use AMD. And you'll have an option of X264. I believe in the simplified view, it tells you like hardware versus software. I don't know why it's called that way. But basically, the software one, or X264, it will encode on your CPU. And the hardware one, the NVIDIA NVENC one, or the AMD VCE one, that's going to encode on your GPU. Remember earlier when I mentioned Task Manager and Analysis Tool, if we go back a little bit, you can see your usage in CPU versus GPU, right? What I like to do is I like to open up a program or whatever I'm doing, make it do stuff. And then I go back here and then I look at OBS and I look at Task Manager and I go, oh, how much do I have? Like a ton of GPU left? Do I have a bunch of CPU left? And if I have a bunch of CPU left, I'll pick the software encoder, which is done on CPU, X264. And then if I have a lot of GPU left, I use the GPU encoder, which is NVIDIA NVENC. So right now, I'm not playing Apex on this machine. So I'm not really running any games on this machine. So I have a ton of GPU left, because the GPU basically isn't doing anything. And that's actually what I forgot to optimize at the start of the stream. I forgot to select NVIDIA NVENC. Because I'm doing stuff that's mostly CPU stuff, that means my system right now is CPU bound. It means the CPU is the slower one to finish its task. So that means I should select NVIDIA NVENC. I should make the GPU do the encoding. If I was playing a game like Apex, which is drastically GPU bound, especially if you're aiming for high refresh rate, that's going to make my system GPU bound, actually. And the game's actually pretty easy on my CPU. So when I'm playing Apex, I actually want to switch to software instead. This is the most common mistake I see people make. People will say, oh, go NVENC, it's like good for everything, or like, oh, go for CPU, NVENC sucks. But the truth is, you should be tailoring this to whatever you're doing. You have not a lot of CPU left, but you have a lot of GPU left. You will pick NVENC. If you don't have much GPU left, but you have a lot of CPU left, then you want to pick X264 or software. You want to optimize your settings based on your game or application. I know it's going to be a little bit hard if you're doing like a subathon where you're switching between games and applications and stuff. You can still optimize a little bit. You can get a baseline and try to figure out what you have more left of. Some games are CPU bound, some games are GPU bound. This depends on the game. So you're playing a game like Metro, right? Metro Exodus. Metro Exodus is a very graphically intense game, but there aren't necessarily that many enemies on screen. The truth is, Metro is like really heavy on both CPU and GPU, but like let's say you have a game that's really pretty and has a lot of polygons and like a lot of like post-processing effects, but it doesn't have a lot of enemies on screen at once. That kind of game tends to be GPU bound. That means that the stuff that the GPU has to do tend to take a lot longer than the stuff the CPU has to do. Some games like Hitman or like a simulation type game, like a city sim type game, they're actually not that difficult to render graphically. There's quite a lot of optimization they've done for the GPU because you have to calculate the AI and the physics for so many little cars and people and like AI and like little agents and stuff like that. Those games tend to be CPU bound because it's just a lot more game stuff the CPU has to do. So the CPU tends to take longer. So you might have to optimize differently depending on the game. Depending on your game, they might not cap the frame rate. Some games, when you first launch it, they might actually go, I'm just going to render as quickly as I can. Like, I don't care about what the player has to do. They're playing game right now, which means that they're probably going to be full screen. I don't care they're running Chrome. I don't care they have ADHD and trying to watch like a YouTube video on the side. I don't care they're in a Discord voice call. I'm just going to ask their computer to render as fast as possible. Just run, you know? Some games will do that, and they'll start the game without any kind of frame rate cap. So the game doesn't go like, their refresh rate, like their display is 60 frames per second. So I'm just gonna only render at 60 frames per second. I don't care, I'm just gonna render as fast as you can, CPU, GPU, go. Some games will do that. So you want to try to make sure that when you're running a game, you find some way to cap the frame rate. There's a couple ways to do this. Some games will come with a software max FPS setting. My game does that. A lot of Unreal games do that. I believe Apex had a version of it, but it's kind of confusing. There's variable refresh rate technology, so if you use a G-Sync display or use a FreeSync display, you can often turn that on in the settings to... Basically, the game will just render as fast as your display can allow, and it will also modify the refresh rate of your display based on the game. That will also do it. So there's also VSync, which is like the older version of variable refresh rate technology. Basically, the VSync, all VSync does is goes, GPU, don't send me frames faster than I can render. The screen goes, hey, I'm like 60 frames per second. Don't send me frames faster than I can render. And there's some issues with VSync. VSync tend to add input latency because it's sitting around waiting for the frame sometimes and kind of inconsistent. VSync will cap the frame rate for you. But if you have the other options, I generally prefer the other options. Basically, what I'm telling you is make sure when you first run a game, it's not rendering as fast as possible because then they'll eat up all the resources you need for OBS. I personally prefer, in the order of most to least preferred, I prefer variable refresh rate technology. So I prefer G-Sync. And then that is around the same as my preference for frame rate capping. Ideally, I like to have both. You might want to use G-Sync, but you still want to make sure the game doesn't render as fast, right? In my ideal world, every game will have both a max frame rate and adaptive sync technology. If I don't have a max FPS setting, then I'll prefer adaptive sync. And then both of those are my preferences over VSync because VSync adds input latency and makes me really bad at Apex. VTube Studio is a game. VTube Studio renders in Unity, which is a game engine. It has a max frame rate setting. If you don't cap the frame rate, it will also render as fast as it can and then eat up all your resources. So you actually want to make sure that in VTube Studio, you go to quality and effects. I think it's under a thing that looks like a little camera. And you want to make sure you have a frame rate cap. In extreme cases where my system is really bottlenecked, I'll actually go in here and I'll set the application FPS to 30 instead of 60. The issue with that is that if you do 30 instead of 60, some of the physics might not be calculated correctly, but I believe they fixed this in a recent update because the physics are going to calculate at the rate of your FPS. This is actually a little tip for optimization. If you're really low on resources, you can like drop that back down to 30 and it'll actually optimize a little bit more. A little note on optimization. If you have lots and lots and lots of CPU and GPU left over, it's actually not as important to have to optimize. because optimization is gonna have less of an effect. You'll still get benefits from optimization. You might like drop 1 frame like every like hour or something, right? That's not too bad. If you optimize, your computer might use like 10 to 20% less power, and that, you know, save your electricity bill a little bit. If you have lots of CPU and GPU left over, it's actually less important to optimize. So if your resources are limited, it's more important to optimize. Another thing to note is that if you can run the game perfectly without streaming, keep in mind that if you're streaming, you're gonna need to lower those settings most likely, because OBS does use quite a hefty bit of CPU or GPU depending on your renderer. You might have to optimize a little bit, like you might have to lower your settings a little bit when you're streaming, even if you can run the game without streaming. You want to tweak the game and encoding settings until your frames basically don't drop. It's okay to drop a couple frames every now and then, like sometimes your CPU spikes because of like your anti-malware or something like that. Like you create a new file and your anti-malware needs to like scan it or something, that's fine. Dropping frames like that, like dropping a couple frames like every like 10,000 or like a couple thousand is fine. Even for me right now, I dropped 34 frames due to rendering lag, and I dropped 17 frames due to encoding lag. It's out of over 100,000 or 200,000 frames, so that's less than 0.1% of frames. That's okay. Dropping a couple frames is okay, but if it's consistently dropping, you want to tweak these settings for OBS and your game until your frames basically don't drop. You might need potato settings like this, but it's okay because people are here to watch your stream mostly. Most games look okay on potato settings. It's fine. This part's gonna go pretty fast, but I think it'll be a lot more clear once I go in and actually show you in a live demo. So to start figuring out your encoding settings, the encoding settings are the settings, basically the video file that your computer sends to Twitch are your encoding settings. To start figuring out your encoding settings, you want to go to the Twitch recommended page or the YouTube recommended page if you're streaming on YouTube. I just Google Twitch bitrate settings or YouTube streaming bitrate settings, and the first result for both of those will send me to the right page, and it'll give you stuff like this. It'll tell you the resolution, it'll tell you the bitrate, and all the other settings you need. You can basically just copy these over. For YouTube, it doesn't tell you everything, but the default or whatever you're using for Twitch is generally okay to get a start on what your bitrates are, like what bitrates you use and stuff. The most important setting you might have to tweak a lot here is the bitrate, if you're depending on your net, and the preset. The preset determines how much CPU or GPU you use for the renderer. Because the higher quality the preset, the more resources it consumes, but the prettier it's gonna look. Like the encoding is gonna look prettier. If you go with a really fast setting, it's actually gonna look uglier, but it's gonna take less CPU or GPU. I'm gonna go off script for a little bit. Keep in mind that in the preset setting, quality is defined as change of visuals over time. So if you're doing something like a drawing stream where your brush is only really your brush that's moving and maybe a couple colors that's moving a little bit, it's actually going to look better. It's going to look better with a lower quality preset, but more performant preset. But if you're doing something like Apex where your character is running around and the whole screen is moving at the same time, you're going to need a higher quality preset to achieve the same level of visual quality, because the entire screen is moving at the same time. So the encoder has to go, alright, the entire frame is changing. Change all of these pixels. If you're doing a drawing stream, you're usually only a couple of pixels are moving at a time, so the encoder doesn't have to work as hard. And this is independent of the bitrate setting. Bitrate is like the maximum amount of information you can send. The encoder setting is how hard your encoder works to squeeze quality into that bitrate. You might be able to get away with a lower quality preset if you're doing a drawing stream or a chatting stream, whereas you might have to use a higher quality preset for something like Apex. So the first step to figuring out what bitrate you want to use is to speed test your net. You want to make sure that your upload speed can handle the bitrate that you're putting into OBS. And you don't want to go over what Twitch or YouTube recommend, because like if you're going over it, it might not even accept the bitrate. So you want to make sure your maximum is whatever the Twitch or the YouTube one are. And you might have to lower it depending on your net, on the strength of your internet connection. One note that if you're watching your stats using your analysis tools, if you're watching both Task Manager and OBS stats, and you're not dropping any frames and you're not really dropping any frames like in OBS, and you're not dropping any frames in Task Manager, like in your Task Manager shows that your GPU and CPU are pretty low or like acceptable, then it means you're upload bound. If you're dropping frames on the stream, but you're not dropping frames on your computer, you're likely bottlenecked by your internet connection. And that can be a problem with your ISP, it can be a problem with your cables, it can be a problem with your router. That's outside the scope of what I can explain. Like, that's outside the scope of what I can like fix for you and try to explain for you in the seminar, but that's something you might have to watch out for. One final thing regarding bitrate is you want to lower your bitrate until it's under your upload speed, because if it's right around the same as your upload speed, you don't have any headroom in case something happens, or like maybe you go to 8 p.m. and your ISP decides, oh, there's a lot of people using the internet right now, I need to like split the upload a little bit. Actually, I got a really good question right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer this while I'm here. So the question is, I use a capture card when playing console games. Should I optimize for GPU bound scenario or CPU bound? So in my experience, most capture cards use CPU. You're likely better off using GPU. Most capture cards use CPU, because I believe most capture cards, if they were to use GPU, they would have to basically add an encoder for both NVENC and AMD VCE, because otherwise they'd be platform locked to either NVIDIA or AMD, right? But capture cards, as far as I understand, they work on most machines. Like, it doesn't matter what GPU. In my experience, they're CPU bound. However, some capture cards do some of the rendering on the hardware, like on the card itself. So it depends on the card. The issue with on hardware capture card encoding is that they tend to be more limited in what format they can render. When OBS takes the feed from the capture card, it most likely is rendering that feed itself in CPU, I think. So it still has to render it as part of the overlay. So as far as I understand, most capture cards are going to be hitting your CPU harder than the GPU. So if you have low CPU, you want to use NVENC, because that puts the encoding on your GPU. If you have low GPU, you want to go X264, because that puts the burden on your CPU instead. And once again, remember, fast worse if you go to CPU usage preset or the GPU usage preset. It's gonna be very similar wording, very fast versus quality, and the other one's gonna be performance versus quality. They mean the same thing. So basically, fast has worse quality, slow to render but has better quality. And for profile, I use main or high. I actually don't know that much about what this does, but generally, if I have the quality settings set to one of the higher quality settings, I'll set this to high. But if I have the usage presets set to some of the lower quality settings, I'll set this to main. I don't actually know what that the profile does, but that's just what I do. It hadn't really made much of an effect on me. I feel like I should probably dig into this some more, but it hadn't really affected me that much in terms of optimization, so that's just something you need to know. One more thing to note is that in the... I forgot where it is, but... Oh, it's in the recording tab. I'll show you later. So in the recording tab, you have the option of setting the output file to an MKV or an MP4. I highly recommend leaving it as MKV. And the reason for why you want to leave it as MKV is because if OBS crashes and you had it set to MP4, you lose the entire VOD. So you lose the whole recording, because MP4 requires you to stop rendering the file properly, whereas MKV will accept an open-ended file in your video streams and stuff. So I highly recommend leaving it as MKV. The reason why people switch it to MP4 is because Adobe Premiere doesn't open MKVs, but OBS actually, the creative OBS actually thought about this. So I'll show you this later, but if you go to File and Remux Recordings, it'll actually, let's see, did I actually make a slide for this? No, I didn't. Okay. So if you go to File and the Remux Recording, you actually drop the MKV in there, and it'll create an MP4 for you, and it's really fast. Because it doesn't actually re-encode the video. It just takes the whole video stream and repackages it into an MP4 for you. You want to start recording because you're not gonna be able to tell whether you're encoding bottleneck unless you start encoding. And unless you're recording something or streaming, you're not gonna get an idea of how much encoder how much CPU or GPU your encoder uses. So when you're benchmarking stuff, you want to start recording to test it. Some games will perform better if you add a game as a game capture object, and some games will perform better if you capture it as a window capture object. This depends on the game. The vast majority of games will perform better as a game capture, but you might run into a weird case where window capture will work better. Just try both. Like before you start your stream, you can try both. If you're like scuffed and unhinged like most VTubers, you can just, you know, you can just try it out on stream, and if the other one like causes your stream to drop frame, just switch to the other one. And just a little side note, I just want to reiterate that recording is key. If you're testing encoding and you're optimizing, you need to record, otherwise the encoder is not activated and you might be optimizing for the wrong situation. You need to be recording to test your optimization settings. This is confusing, so I'll go ahead and answer this question. So we had a question. That's really good. Wait, so if we're low on CPU, do we use NVENC, AMD, or X264? Okay, if you're low on CPU, you use NVENC or AMD. If you're low on GPU, we'll use X264. So if you're low on your Intel i7 or your Ryzen 5800 or something, you want to use NVENC or AMD. If you're low on GPU, like your GeForce or your Radeon, you want to use X264. Yeah, I know it's very confusing, but you'll get the hang of it. I swear it's not complicated. Just flip flop, you know. Okay, this is a lot of information, so you don't actually have to like look at this. But this is just an example of my encoding settings for Apex Legends, a notoriously difficult game to stream. So for Apex, I'll use X264. There's also audio track versus Twitch VOD track here, but I'm not gonna go into that until later during the Q&A. The encoder, I'll use my CPU encoder, so I'll use X264. CBR here for rate control because that's just what Twitch recommends. I set my rate to the max because I spend 120 Canadian every month for internet. Everything else here is default except for the CPU usage preset and the profile. Like I set mine to medium and I set the profile to high. I never go above medium because it starts to eat up a lot of CPU if I make it like more higher quality in medium. And I believe Twitch doesn't even recommend better than medium anyway. It's not worth it. And then I'll drop this down to lower, like to a more performant one if it turns out the computer can't handle it. X264, CBR, 6000, medium, high profile. That's what I use for my encoding settings for Apex. And then in Apex, I'll use borderless window because I hate it when the screen flickers. I like to play my games at 1440p because I have a 1440p display. I'll set my VSync to adaptive because I have a G-Sync display that I spent, you know, way too much money for, like I think like 1,000 Canadian. I enable NVIDIA Reflex, but just like that's not really quality related. That's just like input latency related. You can ignore that. And then all my other settings are set to minimum. When I'm streaming Apex, I'll set all the settings to minimum. But that's fine because the game's so not that well optimized anyway. So the minimum settings aren't actually that much different from the maximum settings. Like the game doesn't look that much worse. So just everything's set to minimum except for the resolution and the VSync setting. Okay, that's my setting for Apex. And once again, I'll be demonstrating all of this in the live demo section. You don't have to write this down if you don't want to, but also these slides are going to go up so you can take a look at the slides if you don't want to write notes. This is just, in my experience, gluttonous program, like common program that eat up a lot of CPU or GPU. And so Chrome or web browsers and Discord, basically. So Chrome and web browsers, just a little note that every time you have a video playing, it actually uses up CPU and GPU. Like I had to decode the video, even if it's like a tiny YouTube video in your timeline. It still uses CPU, like on your Twitter timeline. Like it still uses CPU, GPU. So actually, like when I'm streaming, I'll just make sure that like I open a new tab, and the new tab is like an empty tab or something. Because if I leave it on Twitter, sometimes Twitter will refresh, and then someone will post like a meme or something that's like a video, and then I'll wonder why my stream is dropping frames. So you can blame Twitter for that. YouTube videos will actually also use like CPU and GPU, even if it's like music. Like it still has to decode the video even if it's music. So for YouTube, like I'll also do the same thing. I'll like open a video if I'm listening to something on YouTube, and then I'll just open a new tab, or I'll minimize the window. Minimizing the window works too. So if it's not rendering the video, the only thing it has left to decode is like the audio, and it's actually a lot more performant. I discovered this the other day, but I ordered a lot of takeout from like a Canadian thing, like Canadian service called Skip the Dishes, and I was like, wait, why is my CPU at like 40%? And then I realized the order tracker, like the map that shows where your driver is, it was using 20%, like 25% CPU. It was locking up an entire core. I was like, what the? I was like, what are you? Anyway, so yeah, so actually it wasn't even on the map anymore. It was just on the page where it was just like, hey, what do you think of our service? It was literally like an empty page with like a thumbs up or a thumbs down and like 4 checkboxes, and that page was using 25% CPU. I don't know how. It's important to keep Task Manager open sometimes, guys, and just try to watch and see what programs are like using a ton of CPU and why. I was there for like 10 minutes trying to like kill programs, like killing tabs and stuff, and then I didn't realize it was just this stupid skip the dishes tab. Web developers are evil, but this is clearly a joke for legal reasons. It's not their job to optimize, so they just don't optimize at all. Okay, the other thing is Discord screen share. Discord is written by web developers. You can tell it's written by web developers because it's written in Electron, which is like, you want to write a real program written by real programmers, right? But you're not a real programmer, you're a web developer. For legal reasons, this is a joke. So you have to like have this program that's basically a web browser, right? So you can program in your imaginary web developer like programming languages, so you can like ship real program to real people, right? So you use something like Electron for that, which is basically a web browser. For this reason, a lot of the like optimization or lack of optimization practices that web developers use for websites like Skip the Dishes actually move over, like actually get like transmitted over to Discord. Discord isn't nearly as bad because they're gamers as well, like the game, and they understand optimization a little bit better than whoever coded the Skip the Dishes website. Every screen share you watch on Discord is like watching a separate YouTube video. If you're in a group call and you're watching like 4 screen shares at once, yes, you can do that. You can watch as many as you want. You can watch like 8, I don't know. Like every single one you watch uses like quite a bit of CPU and GPU. So if you're watching like an entire grid, or you're doing a stream and you're doing a collab using Discord screen share to green screen your friends in, you know, that's using a lot of CPU and GPU. And another thing is like those screen shares, if they're higher quality, like if they're higher resolution and they're higher frame rate, they're actually going to use more CPU and GPU. And now bottom right is my friendly little visualization I saved from Google, you know, of Chrome eating up your RAM. But that's a very old dad joke. I'm sure like it's like, I don't know, it's a really old joke. I'm really old, I'm sorry. Okay, next slide please. Troubleshooting common issues. Alright, so there's 3 common issues I want to talk about. So if you're dropping frames because of rendering, remember the OBS stats window. If you're dropping frames because of rendering, try capping the frame rate of your game. Try lowering your game settings. And maybe one of your scene elements is rogue, because scene elements are also written by web developers, so they might be using a lot of CPU without you realizing. You can check those because, you know, OBS counts that as rendering. So if your scene element is, I don't know, skip the dishes order tracker, you might be using a lot of CPU, you never know. And you can also try game capture as opposed to window capture, or the other way around. If you're dropping frame to the encoding, try the other encoder. Remember that you have to be recording or streaming to notice these. Try switching to the other encoder. Try using a faster encoding quality preset. Faster one but uglier. It might not matter, especially if you're doing a drawing stream or talking stream. If your stream allows it, if your viewers don't get sick and you don't get sick watching your stream, you can stream at 30 FPS instead. That's like half the resources necessary to stream at 60 FPS. Might be viable, might not be. I don't know. Depends on what you're doing. Another thing is like the third problem is bad stream quality. You can lower the bitrate up to your recommended maximum for Twitch or YouTube, depending on who you're streaming to. You can also try a lower, slower but higher quality preset. And this one actually also, if it allows it, you can try a 30 FPS instead of a 60 FPS stream. Because if the stream only has to render half the frame, but it had the same amount of bitrate to work with those frames, you can get better quality out of it. Oh, okay, we are at the live demo section of the stream, so give me 1 second. What are your current PC specs? My current PC specs are a i7-9700K, 64 gigabytes of RAM, mostly because of work. I say 32 is plenty for most people. GeForce RTX 2080. I built this computer back in 2019. But I'm going to be optimizing on a machine that has a 7700K and a 1060. I don't know what profile to optimize for this one. Using a 2 PC setup. Okay. I am not using a 2 PC setup. I'm using a 2 PC setup just for this stream. And the reason why I did that is because I want to demonstrate on a completely new machine how to optimize. So on this second PC, I also have OBS set up. And so just pretend I only have one PC. So this second PC is just to demonstrate how to optimize for a completely new machine. It's going to 30 FPS a big drop to stream quality. Should it be a last resort change? Going to 30 FPS depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing a talking stream, I highly doubt anyone cares that it's 30 or 60 FPS. If you're playing something like Apex, you probably want it to stay 60 FPS. If you're playing something like a visual novel or something like RTS, I don't think anyone cares that it's 30 versus 60 FPS. I say it depends on the type of game you're playing. We have OBS here. We have a fresh install of OBS. All I've done with this OBS version is connected to Twitch. I haven't done anything. You can see there's an empty scene here. That's intended. And then we'll have to open Apex Legends. So the first thing I will do is I will go here, open a speed test and run my speed test. You can use whatever you want. I would say run a couple and then pick the lowest number, because sometimes your ISP will lie to you and like they'll have a contract with speedtest.net or something. But basically run speed test to figure out what your maximum upload rate is. And when I did mine, it said that my maximum upload was 90 megabit per second, which you'll have to convert to kilobit per second. So I just search for Mbps to kbps with a big M, not a small m. And that tells me my upload from my internet is a maximum of 90,000 kilobits per second, right? And then I'll go here and I'll go to Twitch. Okay, what's my maximum upload kilobit I can use? That's 6,000. So I was like, okay, I can use all the way up to a maximum because 6,000 is clearly less than 90,000, right? I can use all the way up to maximum because my goal is to stream at 1080p 60 FPS, right? And you can see Twitch has other settings for 30 FPS as well, other settings for 60 FPS as well. So if you're streaming at 1080p, you have to use a different bitrate setting, stuff like that. So since I'm streaming at 1080p 60 FPS, I'll be going ahead and setting it to 6,000. So let's go ahead and copy these things over, shall we? So let's go to settings, OBS window. You could click on output and then go over here. And the first thing I do is I don't like how this is simplified here. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this to advanced. And I'm gonna go in here and pick my encoder. We know that Apex is a GPU bound game, so we'll probably want to use CPU. At least this is on my current machine. We might, depending on how this machine handles it, we might have to actually use the other way around. I don't know yet. So let's just pick, based on my current information, I know that Apex is probably GPU bound, so let's pick X264. And then we'll go over here and go, okay, so it wants CBR, right? So let's pick CBR. And then over here for bitrate, I know that I can handle all the way up to a maximum, so we'll plug in 6,000 here. And then let's see, we have rate control, frame rate 60 or 50 FPS. That actually is the frame rate actually stored, I believe, in the stream section. No, not stream, general. Video setting. Okay, there we go. Make sure we are 60 or 50. We'll pick 60. And then I'm streaming at 1080p 60, so we'll have to change this output resolution to 1080p. We'll select. Where's 1080? There we go. So we make sure it's 1080p. Downscale filter that tells you which one is the best, but I just leave it at default. 60 FPS values. Yep. Go back to the output, and then we'll see it says keyframe interval 2 seconds. But actually, this is something I didn't set on my current machine. I probably set this to 2 here. It's recommending 2 seconds. Okay. Reset quality. Actually, we're looking at the wrong one. We're looking at the NVENC settings versus X264. Okay, we'll go to very fast versus medium, right? In my experience, Apex is a pretty fast game, so on my current machine, I use medium. And profile, main, or high, I'm using high on my current machine, so I'm gonna go with my current machine settings. And then we'll see how this runs. We'll click apply. Make sure recording is set to the same one. Yep. Is that to the same one as the stream one? Yep. Make sure it's set to MKV. Streaming, we'll double check our settings here. Alright, that's my current settings for Apex. Next thing we want to do is we'll open our analysis tools. We don't need this anymore. We can just minimize this. So, we'll go to view. No, we'll go to docs. We'll go to stats. You can also go to view stats. I'll show you the difference between these two. So this is the view stats one, and this is the docs one. So if I try to drag the view stats one here, it won't actually let me. Like, it will stay at a separate window. We'll drag stats here. We can actually do this. We can actually oh my god, why are you not doing it now? Okay. Let's see. Close this. Watch this not work like today, but it works every other day. Will you let me drop it here? Okay, I don't know why it's not letting me drop. Okay, there we go. So if we double click on this, actually lets you drop it in here. That's actually how I have mine set up. So I usually have mine. Oh God, please, just come out. There we go. God, please, just okay. I'm using a touchpad for this right now, please, so bear with me. So I usually like to have this scene transition under my controls button because the control don't take up that space, and I like to have this under or left of my mixer. So I like to have this like I like to have this under my mixer. Okay, there we go. Bigger. Because we don't need to see that right now. So remember, we're watching here. We're watching frames missed due to rendering lag, and we're watching frames missed due to encoding lag. So let's drag this over here. Okay. So we need to add Apex here, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to run Apex. Where's Apex? Let me get a sip of water while I hope that doesn't kill me. Okay. Perfect. My B2 studio is still live. Whew. Man, running panels is exhausting. We're gonna have to run this game in windowed mode as well because I can't see what I'm doing. Oh no, I can do this. Okay. Actually, might still have to run in windowed mode. Okay, let's wait for it to load. Okay. So the first thing, this is also a fresh installer Apex. I haven't changed any settings at all. So, oh, it's already stuttering. Let's see what our, let's go to, oh my God, it's so laggy. Okay, let's open up Task Manager and see what our CPU and GPU are at right now. Oh my Lord. Okay, we might be CPU bound on this system. So we might actually do the opposite here, but let's see what happens. Okay, let's see. So the first thing, oh my God, it is so laggy. Okay, I'm gonna lower all the settings to minimum. And go to video. And we'll do VSync triple buffered. We can do that. We can do adaptive because on this machine there's also a G-Sync display. And we'll lower everything down to minimum. Well, I can leave the VRAM at pretty high actually. Yeah. Leave it at 2. And we'll lower everything to minimum. Actually, texture filtering doesn't usually use up that much resources. We'll leave that at 16x. We'll lower everything else to minimum though. One thing I noticed is that sometimes Apex is really slow and laggy in the main menu. I don't understand why, but like you start the game and it'll be fine. It's something I don't quite understand. Click apply. One thing that's useful here, if we go to gameplay, you can actually turn on frame rate display inside the game. So, and I want anonymous mode, probably yes, but who cares? But turn on performance display so we can see what the in-game frame rate is. Please disregard the player name. Yeah. Please disregard my player name. Yeah. Don't. Okay. I can already tell the game's running a lot better. Let's look at our task manager real quick. Wow, look at CPU drop down to 69%. Okay. Now, one thing about this is when you're playing a game, in the main menu, it's going to behave differently than inside the game. So you actually have to be inside a relatively realistic scenario for the game for you to be able to actually judge how it's going to perform, right? So this is kind of weird because I only have one display on this, so I'm gonna have to see if I run this in windowed mode. Do it in windowed mode. Do I have enough room in windowed mode? Let's go to let's set to 16 by 900. I wouldn't normally do this, but I need to be able to see what I'm doing here. Keep this. So for Apex, what I like to do is I actually like to go into the training room. What do you call it? The firing range. There we go. And I'm trying to make room. So we'll keep a tab on this over here. We'll just keep watching CPU and GPU. I know my avatar is blocking it, but yeah, I'm just trying to keep an eye on this. There we go. So here we'll add a game capture, and we'll add Apex, and Capture specific window. Window will choose Apex Legends. And we'll make sure that we have the limit capture frame rate on because we don't want to capture more than we need to. Sometimes the game might be running at 120, but the stream's only 60 frames per second. We want to set that there. The other settings are optional. Click OK. And then go here and we'll go just make it fit the whole thing. Now we can start looking at frames missed due to rendering lag and frames missed due to encoding lag. So, I don't know how much I trust this number right now because I just set my Apex settings to a different setting. So it might have been it might have skipped some frames earlier when Apex was really laggy. So let's go ahead and click reset to reset the stats. And now we're back at 0. And let's wait a couple seconds just to see what happens in the main menu. It looks like we're not missing any frames due to rendering. So let's go ahead and enter the firing range, shall we? I don't want to play trios right now. I'm on a touchpad. Let's see. Firing range. Ready. Okay, there we go. I don't know why Apex requires you to connect and matchmake to enter the firing range by yourself. It seems like a waste of server resources. Okay. Oh my god, why are you taking so long? Let's see if we dropped any frames. We haven't dropped any frames yet. We're good here. Okay, sweet. I think it's because you can enter firing range more than one person. I guess that's true, but I mean, I'm also not one person right now. Okay. So we're at 60 FPS right now. Perfect, rock solid. Okay. Okay. Let's see, have we dropped any frames? No, we're good. We haven't dropped any rendering frames. Now let's try recording. So remember that the encoder doesn't actually enable, and oh my god! The encoder doesn't actually enable unless you start recording. So let's see. Let's see what's happening here. Oh Jesus Christ! You see, I forgot to mention this, but it turns red if you're skipping a lot. So right now it's skipping 80% of the frame due to encoding. So yeah, so if we were to stream this right now, it will actually be really choppy. So let me just try to demonstrate that. Well, actually, oh my god, I can't play it on this touchpad. My skin is too dry. It doesn't actually show you the stream being choppy, but if I were to stream this right now, so let me try to demonstrate. So let's stop. So if you were to open the recording, go to file, show recordings, and we were to open this. Oh my god. Why can't I open this? So it should be really choppy. So let's see. Yep. So so that's what's happening in your stream because the encoder is bottlenecked. Okay, let's turn this off. Let's try to diagnose what's causing the bottleneck. Okay. Let's start recording. And then we'll go back to unpause the game because when the game is paused, it's not actually rendering frames most of the time. So let's see. So it looks like we're hitting 100% CPU, but none on the GPU. Huh. So this had the opposite problem as my main machine. Okay, let's see. So we'll stop here. The first thing you do is let's go to settings. It's still stopping the recording. Let's try switching to the other encoder and see what happens. NVENC. And then we'll have to set the bitrate again. And then we can set the keyframe interval. Reset quality. That's what Twitch said. We want quality. Profile high. Okay. Start recording. Let's reset these settings. Okay, now let's run around in the game. Oh my god. I actually can't aim. Oh my god. I actually cannot aim. This is amazing. Okay. Man, touchpads suck. Okay. Ooh, Lord, what are you doing? Okay. Turn this off. Stop recording. So according to this, we haven't dropped any frames. Let's check our recording, shall we? Fresh. So it should be sorted by 8. Check the newest one. Is this the newest one? Should be. Well, no, we go to the oldest one. And if it's really choppy. Yep, that's the oldest one. So, oh yeah, you see? The new one, because we switched to GPU encoding, and because we were CPU bound, it fixed all the lag. Okay, that's bigger. Yeah, as far as I know, this frame rate is rock solid. Alright. So that was actually way easier than I expected. So what if you wanted to use CPU for whatever reason? Let's see what happens if you switch back to CPU. Is there a way we can optimize this to use CPU? I don't know what situation we want to do this in, but maybe you really need to use CPU for whatever reason. Oh my god, that's way too. Let's see if setting this preset to very low, very fast will actually fix it. Ultra fast, profile main, and CBR. Yeah, that's fine. Let's try that. Let's see. Reset this. Run around a little bit. So remember, we're back on CPU. We're back on CPU, but we use a different quality preset. Okay. Now let's stop. Oh, look at that. We didn't drop any frames. Let's double check to make sure we're actually on CPU. Yeah, we're on x264. Now, if I remember correctly, in this recording, I'm running forwards and backwards. So let's see what that recording looks like. Yep, there's the right recording. So we were able to switch back to CPU and leave our GPU free to do other things, despite initially having a CPU bottleneck, because we changed the profile. That's a pretty drastic difference, right? Went from dropping 81% of the frames to dropping none of the frames. But if you pay attention, if we freeze frame here, because we dropped to a lower quality preset, let's see if I can screenshot. How do I screenshot? How do I screenshot this? Save. We'll save this on the desktop, shall we? So we freeze frame here in the middle of one of our movement frames. Where's the save? Here we go. If we freeze frame here and zoom in, and we'll give it a little bit of time for the encoder to catch up. Try to read my name. Can you see how blocky the frame is? So we've essentially traded quality for CPU, and we can probably make this better. Yeah, there's a lot of artifacting, right? So you can see the effect of using a more performant but lower quality preset. It allowed us to stream without dropping frames, but it did make the stream really ugly. And depending on your stream, your overlay and stuff, this might be acceptable, it might not be. I personally, I'm okay with stuff like this personally, but I know some people really like having quality on the stream. For some people this will actually not be acceptable. But maybe let's see how much quality we can squeeze out of this frame. Let's see instead of using ultra fast, let's try using like somewhere in the middle, like very fast. Okay, now let's try recording. Is Apex still running? Yep. Oh, for this one we'll go sideways, shall we? Actually no, going forward and backwards is pretty good because you have a different speed. Now I'll go towards here. Do a couple more things in this one so we know it's this one. Okay. That black and white is actually easier to render, by the way. Okay. Go back to our OBS. F5. Disregard the player. Yeah, please disregard the player name. I think it's this one, right? Okay, go to the right. Yep, that's correct. On. Pick a good frame to pause in. Is it a good frame to pause in? Probably not. Let's go back a little bit. Oh, and no pause. Pause here. Go to file, save image. Even on desktop again. I minimize apex. This. Oh. This. Minimize this. I believe this is a new one. Yep. Okay. So it's a little bit hard to tell, but can you see the difference in the quality? So this is the old one. This is the old one with this ultra fast quality, and this is the new one with the very fast quality. Like, it's still kind of chunky, right? But like, it's a lot more usable. It's especially it's especially obvious here in this edge right here. Yeah, it's like it's like a little bit deep fried, but it's not like it's not burnt. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really obvious here, like with the colors change. It's not as obvious in the brown, where it's like over here, not as obvious because that's noise anyway. But like if you look at this, like this yellow line is like kind of crispy right here, right? So, but it is. Am I crazy? It is better, right? It is like slightly better. Like, actually, it's like noticeably better. Like compared to this, oh, it's really obvious at the bottom. So like if I zoom in, like you see this. Okay, you can like this is really crispy, right? It's just like well done. And then we go to the next one. Like well done. And this one is like I like medium, right? I like medium, maybe a little bit more than medium, like medium well. Like you can still see the artifacts a little bit, but like it's only there. Like me personally, if I was just watching someone streaming this, I wouldn't really care about this level of artifacting. Yeah. But did we drop any frames? Let's see. I've got to look at that. We didn't. So that means we could we've optimized a little bit better. So if you wanted to, you could actually go in and go in here and tweak everything. Maybe try like faster or fast. Medium was too slow. Very fast seems like it's not dropping frames at all. Maybe you can even go faster if you feel like it. I'm gonna leave that there for this one. Yeah, it turns yeah, I mean that seems like pretty good settings to me for this machine. But keep in mind, I'm also not running VTube Studio. On this. I don't know what the performance profile for VTube Studio is. But yeah, that actually took less time than I thought it would. That concludes the live demo. I will say that's usable for me. One little tip is that if you're streaming with an overlay, if you make your game smaller, it actually uses less. It would actually use less resources. So you can actually like if you make your game a little bit smaller on your overlay and you leave the rest for like chat or something, it actually makes it so that you'll squeeze a little bit more quality out of your encoder. So let's go ahead and turn this off and go back to our slides. Ta-da. Whew. Okay, we're at the final section of the seminar. Let me get a drink and then I'll start answering questions. All right. Thank you for watching the seminar. Thank you for watching the presentation portion of the seminar. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the question that I already got, and then I'll splice in the questions from chat. I guess I can turn the overlay on later, but I'll leave it off for now. So the first question we got from the workshop questions is do you guys use your mics as it is when VTubing, or do you guys use filters? If so, what settings do you guys recommend on a dynamic mic? I don't use a dynamic mic actually, so I don't know if I can answer that question for you specifically for a dynamic mic, but I would say for most streams you'll probably want some kind of denoiser, some kind of noise gate, some kind of compressor, and some kind of limiter. And then we'll transition over. There we go. Okay, so this is my settings for my microphone. I have a RX8 voice denoise. You can also use the built-in noise reduction. It's a little bit more aggressive, but I like this because it works well for me. My filter chain for my microphone, which I actually recommend for any microphone, is some kind of denoiser. This is a VST plugin. I selected my RX8 voice denoise VST, and then if you use isotope, you can use these settings. I just use adaptive mode. That's it. It's just I have it set to dialogue, and then when I'm singing, my karaoke microphone is set to music, and you can pick surgical or gentle depending on which one sounds better for you. And then you can tweak these other settings, but I just have mine set to default, I think. So for the noise gate, so the noise gate, it just turned off the microphone when you like stop talking, and then so you don't get like a little hum sometimes, you know. And so you can tweak these settings until you tweak these settings, and these settings are gonna be different depending on what levels your microphone is set at. And then I have a compressor. You can screen cap this if you feel like it's for the threshold will vary depending on how loud you are. 25 millisecond attack, 150 millisecond release. Output gain, you can mess this you can mess around with the output gain to level off your audio depending on how loud or how soft you want it. And then I have a limiter, and the limiter is just set to default. It's just to make sure the audio is not going to clip in the encoder. That's my settings for the audio. How do I stop myself from echoing in OBS when I stream? I've been noticing that whenever I stream or mute my audio, once I open it, I will echo. I solved it the first time by going into the advanced audio properties and changing everything into 00dB, but this time it didn't work, and I had to close on OBS and restart it again to stop myself from echoing. I'm a tech noob, I have no idea what's going on. Blah, 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 blah. So if you're echoing and you're not watching your own stream, it might be that you have one audio source being piped multiple times through the encoder. You might have something like two microphones here, or you might have like something that combines your audio sources into one. So for me, I think it's more common for your background audio to echo. One common problem with that is if you have like, let's say I have I don't have Jupiter Jazz open here right now, but this is my BGM. So if I were to play this, you should be able to hear it. Let me do something real quick. Let me make sure this is on both the VOD and the... I'm not gonna go into the VOD thing yet. Make sure everything's set to every track. Okay, perfect. So if I were to play this, you're gonna hear the stream echo. And that's because what I'm doing now is I have... Let's see. I'm playing my BGM. I don't usually do this, but I'm playing my BGM on here. You can hear the echo, right? You should be able to hear the echo. I'm playing my beat. Oh, I forgot to do this real quick. There we go. There we go. So what I've done is I've unmuted my Jupiter Jazz here, which is the same as this, and you should be able to hear it echo. And the reason for that is because I'm playing this so I can hear it, but this is being captured by desktop audio. But then Jupiter Jazz, which is an element in here, like an audio element in here, is also playing. So that is the most common issue. You have a BGM element here, and then you have something playing, and then it's playing through desktop audio. What I recommend is actually to try to capture audio directly from the source. So instead of using desktop audio, which I'm doing now just because I'm doing stuff that's specifically related to the streaming, so I wanted to capture desktop audio. So what I recommend is actually not use desktop audio. So I turned it off. You like stop hearing the Jupiter Jazz, but I'll play this. But now you should be able to hear Jupiter Jazz. I turned it off again, it doesn't really matter. So what I like to do is if you look at here, Voice Meter VAIO, Discord, and Chrome. So I'll have Discord, my call audio coming in via a virtual audio cable. I have Chrome going into another virtual audio cable. And I have Cubase, which is my audio DAW, going to another audio cable. That allows me to capture audio separately from different sources and then mix them separately for different sources, as opposed to having everything on desktop audio, which can lead to echoing problems because of this, right? Because you'll put this here, and then you'll put a source for the audio here, and then you'll echo. Another common issue is that your headphones might just be leaking into your mic, or you might have loopback on your DAW, on your audio interface. Loopback actually feeds the audio back into your recording for your like audio interface. You can Google that for your particular interface. It's a feature on my interface as well, but it's I have it off for these reasons. Okay. Recommendations for noisy household. My current housing situation involves TV blasting at full volume almost all day long, as well as people talking all the time outside my room. The door can be closed and muffles the sound, but I'm still looking for a good mic that can cancel out most of the noise. First thing I recommend for that is actually Before you buy a microphone, try to move your microphone closer to your mouth first, and then running a noise gate on your mic. Ideal mic distance it's gonna vary a little bit depending on your microphone and how you sound. But for me, I like to use 1 to 2 fists. I'm gonna put my fist in front of my mouth so I'm kissing the microphone. So like this is 2 fists, 2 fists away. This is 1 fist away. So I recommend running, try and putting yourself 1 or 2 fists away from your microphone, and the fists are honestly like this is like rotated like sideways, and this is like rotated lengthwise. It doesn't honestly matter that much. It's like roughly around like 6 inches, like somewhere around 6 to 8 inches, right? Or like 4 inches. The issue with being a little bit too close to your microphone is that you start to sound like this, and you might hear that, you know. But if you're too far away, it might be a little bit quiet, and you'll capture the background audio a little bit. So the goal is to maximize the contrast between the level of your voice and the levels of the background noise, right? So when you do that, you can actually run a noise gate and a noise suppression system, like a noise suppression plugin. I believe OBS has one built in. I don't use it anymore though. And if you do that, it'll make it easier for the noise suppression to cancel out the stuff in the back. If that doesn't solve it for you, like if with your current microphone that doesn't solve it for you, then I can recommend a couple of microphones. A couple of microphones, is it MB7? Sure. SM58, sure, MB7. And cardioid mic. A couple things you can do is try to find a mic with a cardioid pickup pattern. So if you look at this, this is a good visualization. So a mic with a cardioid pickup pattern will only pick up audio from the front, and then in the back it will kind of like cancel out. It will kind of like not pick up stuff in the back. So you can try picking up a mic with a cardioid pickup pattern like this. I can't see my stream anymore because I need to move my. There we go. So you might want to pick up a mic with a cardioid pickup pattern. Common mics for these are like I think most mics are like this. Like the SM7B is like that too. The MB7 is like that. The SM58 I think has a cardioid pickup pattern. So basically it only pick up stuff in the front. So if your audio is coming from the back, it won't pick it up as well. You want to avoid an omnidirectional mic, which is something that's going to pick up audio equally from all angles. So common cardioid mic, super common, is like an AT2035 or something. AT2035. I need a quadcast mic has like a couple pickup patterns. The blue Yeti had a couple pickup patterns you can select from. Like these are all cardioid mics. If that's still a problem, you can try going for a dynamic mic. The one that everyone talks about is the Shure SM7B. Like, I'm trying to try SM7B. This is like the mic that all the streamers use. You know, all the popular streamers use this mic because it makes you sound all low and deep and shit. But you don't need to use this mic. You can use any dynamic microphone that has like any dynamic microphone, because dynamic mics tend to like not capture as much detail and subsequently also not capture as much noise. So you can try for something like a cheaper dynamic mic, like a SM58. You can try an MV7. MV7 is really popular for streamers because it's pretty good value. I don't know anything about the quadcast. I think the quadcast is what is a quadcast? Like I think I hear good things about the quadcast, but me personally, I would go for an MV7 or SM58 if you can't fix the other problems with a condenser microphone. The nice thing about the MB7 is that it's way cheaper. It's like half the cost of a SM7B, but it's made by the same company. It has a similar tone, but it's not as expensive. It's not as versatile. But this SM7B is meant for like more than just talking. That's why it's so expensive. Yeah, so I would personally pick the MB7 if you want. If you absolutely can't fix your problems with like software and placement, do that. How do I make sure my VOD isn't muted when I play DMCA music? Can I do this through OBS? Yes. If you go to settings, I don't know if YouTube supports this. Twitch supports this. So if you click on the output settings, you can enable the setting called Twitch VOD track and audio track, right? Well, you're actually sending 2 audio tracks to Twitch. When you send these 2 audio tracks to Twitch, the VOD track means that any audio that goes into track 2 it's gonna go into the VOD audio. Anything that goes to track 1 will go to the stream track audio. So if you're streaming and you stop streaming, anything that's on 1 and not 2, because we enable the Twitch VOD track, will not be on the VOD. What I like to do is I actually like to play YouTube music from YouTube and pipe it to audio track 1, and then for my VOD I just have this Jupiter Jazz like royalty-free music that Seven Forest Orte graciously wrote for me. That goes in the VOD too. So instead of hearing the stream BGM, you'll hear the VOD BGM usually. And I can open the little VOD to show you what that means in a little bit. Yeah, I'll do that later. You enable Twitch VOD track, set it to 2, and then if you go to advanced audio properties, if you go to tracks on the right, if we look at Jupiter Jazz, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Display capture. Okay. So if you, a little bit hard to tell, it might be a little bit small, but if you go look at this and look at the tracks on the right, everything is set to go to every available track, right? Except I have a virtual audio cable running from Chrome. Chrome only goes to, it doesn't go to track 2, but it goes to track 1. And if I go Jupiter Jazz goes to track 2, but it doesn't go to track 1. What this means is that the Chrome audio will go to the stream, but it won't go to the VOD. And the Jupiter Jazz, which is like my royalty-free BGM that Sun Force graciously wrote for me, it goes to the VOD, but it doesn't go to the stream because it's unchecked on 1, and it's unchecked on 1 but checked on 2, and then the Chrome one is checked on 1 but not on 2. Did that make sense? You know what? I think at some point I'll actually just do a full audio gear rundown, like audio gear and setup rundown for my setup. I think that'll be a pretty fun stream. But that's how I would set up the Twitch VOD stuff. Is there a way to check my stream's performance and bandwidth before hitting live? Yes. I mentioned earlier that I already answered this question in the slides, but this right here, the stats window, this is how you monitor it. You see over here, I actually dropped 56 frames in rendering, and I dropped 45 frames in encoding. And I don't know why, but something must have spiked. But this is still fine because it's 45 frames out of basically 500,000 frames in total, so it's fine. How big of an impact on CPU the different variants of OBS have? A pretty big impact, like 5 to 20% if you're using Streamlabs. I haven't used the other ones, but you definitely don't want to use Streamlabs. I would recommend not using Streamlabs if your goal is to optimize CPU performance. What if I have a potato PC? If you have a potato PC, all the rules still apply, because I didn't give you an absolute value for any of these settings. You want to scale your settings to your PC no matter what. Whether you have a PC with 16 cores or a PC with 4 cores or a PC from 2011 versus the PC from like 2022, you still want to use the same process to optimize your stream. And of course, available resources also depend on what you're doing. So Metro 2022, like Metro Exodus is going to require more CPU and GPU than like Overwatch 1, right? Is there a minimum set of specs you recommend per streaming PC? I'd say minimum a i5, like a modern, like 1 or 2 year, like up to 1 or 2 year old i5, or like a 5600 or something like that. You know, like the X6, like something 600 from Ryzen, or a something 600 from Ryzen, or something 600 like i5 is what I recommend for a minimum. You can get by with lower than that. It's just you'll have to work a little bit harder to squeeze the performance you need for your stream out of it. You might need to lower your game's resolution. That's a pretty big that's pretty important. And I say for a game like a GPU, I say like minimum, I say like me personally, I would say I wouldn't go under a 1050 or whatever the equivalent of a 1050 is. I say you're pretty comfortable with a 1060 or anything higher. Like the laptop I just did a demo on has a 1060 in it. Anything equivalent to that, I say is like pretty comfortable already. And I wouldn't go under 1050 just because anything under 1050 is NVIDIA just basically reselling really old, like really crappy GPUs. Anything under 1050, so I wouldn't recommend that. They're actually really crappy. Whatever the Radeon version of that is, you can. I don't know what the equivalent Radeon versions of those are, but that's the minimum for a graphics card. And I say for RAM really depends on how many tabs you have open in Chrome. That's it. Like, I will start at 16 gigabytes of RAM, and then 16 gigabytes is like, how to say this? Like, so streaming doesn't actually use that much RAM. Let me check how much RAM streaming, like my OBS is using right now. Let's see, RAM with OBS. Yeah, so OBS is only using one gig of RAM. That's not a lot. Like Chrome, compared to Chrome, which is eating up like 3 gigs already by itself. It's not terrible. Like I say, so you can get by with 16 gigs. You might have to close some stuff. 32 is really comfortable for content creation. If you're doing any kind of type of content like drawing or making videos, I would recommend 32. 16 is like, you can get by with 16. It's not terrible. MMOs are mostly GPU bound then, right? Depends on the MMO. I would say, actually, if there's a lot of people in your world, like in your instance, if you have a lot of people in your instance, it's probably just CPU bound, not GPU, because there's a bunch of people that you have to like render and stuff. There's something called a draw call in game rendering. Oh, I should probably explain that. Like, I'm a game developer, if you don't know. So like I'm a game developer and I work in the engine sometimes. Like so I understand like how this stuff works. So like there's something called a draw call. So like a draw call is the CPU asking the GPU to render something. So the CPU in the game context often behaves like a manager of the game engine. So the CPU goes, hey GPU, I need to render something. Here's the files. I need you to make like render these triangles and make this character, right? Here, make it. I'm gonna focus on physics for now. Now render this. Like, that's called a draw call. That's a CPU going, hey, GPU, render a big booba lady for me if you're playing Genshin Impact. Those draw calls are relatively cheap compared to what the GPU has to do. However, if you have, let's say, 20 big booba ladies to render, like 20 balls or something, the CPU had to go, alright, here's one. Okay, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. It has to do that 20 times, and it goes, okay, now I'm gonna go like render the physics or something, like and like calculate like hits and stuff like that, right? Those draw calls are CPU. So if you have like 1,000 characters in one instance, the CPU has to do at least 1,000 draw calls like to the GPU. Has to go like, okay, render this, you know, has to do that 1,000 times per frame to the GPU to make it render those characters. If you have a lot of elements in the scene, a lot of meshes, the CPU is actually the bottleneck in that situation. It's not the GPU. Even though the GPU is like rendering a lot of polygons as well, it often becomes a CPU bottleneck, not a GPU bottleneck. That was really a long way to answer. MMOs are mostly GPU bound. It depends on the MMO, depends on the situation. I use a capture card when playing console games, so I optimize to GPU bound scenario or CPU bound. Oh, I already answered that one, but I'll answer it again. CPU, because most capture cards are encoding on the CPU, or they're encoding a hardware and they're making the CPU do disk I/O and stuff. Is it better to import your stream assets via as a local file or via URL? It is theoretically better to import your stream assets as a local file because you're not bottlenecking, you're not using your net to do it. However, most people don't have an Apache server or something running on their computer. So a lot of these web tools, like they only work because someone needs to run it on a server and then serve it as a website to you. So it's a little bit difficult for some stream elements to be run as a local file because you need an entire ass like web server to run it. And I blame web developers for this. Web developers are like, yeah, we'll never need to run this app anything as in any context outside of a web server. So now you're stuck running it as a web server, right? So you have to use a URL for it. So just for convenience reasons, you kind of have to do the URL for a lot of elements. Honestly, I don't think the performance impact of running it by a local file versus a URL is gonna matter that much. The only thing that really matters is like if you have like an image that's never gonna change, it's probably easier to just have it as a local file. Like, or for me, I have like I have a video that plays in the background that says no signal. If I don't have anything like on the stream at once, I would recommend that running it as a local file just so you don't use up a bunch of your download bandwidth every month, you know. I hope that answers your question. Voice meter, yeah, I use voice meter, but mostly because it seems like a necessary evil to run virtual audio cables. Because I use stream elements to handle my overlay setup and import it over, but I heard you can do it via local file directly. Is there a way to do this? I'm not too familiar with Stream Elements. Honestly, I just started using Stream Elements because I'm pretty slow in updating my overlays. Like this chat on the bottom left of the screen, that's my first time using Stream Elements. I didn't even know you could use local files for it. Well, I mean, if you can, it'll probably use less bandwidth, but I don't think it's worth the inconvenience. So you can use the VA cable without VM. Haven't tried it. Yeah, you can, but then you can't monitor. You can't. Like, it's easier to set the settings without like for monitoring some of the cables. So it's for specific reasons. I have to route things through voice meter, and you can use the cables, but you still have to route things through voice meter sometimes. So I just find it easier to use both voice meter and the cables. I think that's, unless you guys have any more questions in the ENVTubers Discord. We're out of ENVTubers Discord questions. You guys have any more live questions you want to ask before I end the seminar? It's been going on pretty long. I'm gonna drink something in the meantime. Okay, let's move this out of the way. How do we decrease audio latency during streams? Honestly, the only way to decrease audio latency, if it's not your plugin latency, is just to use your low latency mode. So I'm opening up Premiere right now to show you what a dual track setup will look like. So if I open up a VOD, do I have a VOD here? I can open. I think it's this one, right? There we go. Wait, no, that's not right. Okay, I think I have to do the third one. That's it. We're doing it live, boys. Okay, give me a sec. So we go to. We'll pick an old VOD. Let's see. I'm gonna find one. Let's see if this one is valid. There we go. Yeah, we can use that one. So this is an MKV. I'm gonna go ahead and okay. The file Remux recordings. Drag the MKV in here, and then I'm gonna click Remux. Oh, I might drop frames. Am I dropping frames? Okay. Alright, just taking a little while. Just perfect. I'll see my answers to questions. At a stream mirror, like there are times when audio and video are noticeably out of sync. Noticeably out of sync? Out of sync seems like another problem, not a Oh, you mean like when you're doing karaoke stuff? So you might want to like go to your, let's see, I think there's a way to add a delay here. So if I go to display, oh, filter. I never had to do this, but you can probably add a render delay. Yeah, there we go. So you can add a render delay to most things, and then you can just use this and set the offset here. I never had to do this, but you could do that. But you have to record the stream to test. So you can add a render delay to your sources, but you have to do this for every source. And you explain the gun image on the left middle of the stream. There's a gun image? Oh, that one! Oh, this is from the VOD where I couldn't turn off an alarm because I was not allowed to speak English. This is a really funny frame for it to stop on. And then so at some point I unplugged my Echo Dot, and I was so angry at it, so I just had to put a gun on it anyway. It's not a real gun. Right, just in a new file. Okay. If you look at this stream, if you look at here, there's two audio streams. Can you see it? I'll get DMCA if I try to play these because one of these has like DMCA audio. If you look at the waveform, they're pretty similar, but basically the first track is the Twitch audio track, like the live audio track, and the second track is the Twitch VOD track. And the BGM for both of these are different. The BGM for the Twitch VOD track has royalty-free BGM, and the BGM for the Twitch track, the Twitch live track has like Chrome audio, like Chrome. I'm just like playing stuff on YouTube. Would I have VOD recorded on local? Yes. So I always record local VODs because if you were to record, in my particular use case, if you were to record the VOD only to Twitch, you wouldn't get these two tracks. Twitch will drop the live track and it will only keep the VOD track. So if you record locally and you have multiple audio tracks set up, it'll actually record multiple audio tracks in your file. And then you can actually decide which one to use if you feel like it. I've never used the live one because like that's the whole point of a VOD. But that whole point of a bot having its own like audio track, like music track. But you could do that. You can actually use more than 2. You can use like up to 6, I think, or 8. But I only use 2. So you record on stream and record on local at the same time? Yes, I record on stream and local at the same time. So I just let Twitch record the VOD by itself, but then I have a local VOD that I upload to YouTube because I don't trust Twitch 100% and I don't want to re-download it. A stream overlay is multiple images. Do image sources take up a lot of rendering power? Should I combine them into one image, or is that not important? And as far as I know, having multiple image sources hadn't created a significant source of rendering power. Hadn't created a significant dent in rendering. However, using multiple video sources on OBS seems to be a pretty big hit. So you want to try to minimize your video sources. You don't need to minimize your image sources that much. How do you record and stream at the same time? It does that by default. So you go to settings. I think it's an option. So if I go here, output. It's under output under general. I don't remember. Let's see. There we go. So we go to general. There's an option under output to automatically record when streaming. And you can also start the recording in the middle of a stream and stop the recording in the middle of stream, but still keep streaming. You can actually record in a different setting than you, like if we go here, put output, it's not gonna let me change it while I'm in the middle of a stream, but you can actually use a different, under encoder, you can actually use a different encoder for your recording than your stream. The issue with this is that you're encoding twice. You have to encode once for Twitch and once for the local recording. But if you have the CPU power, or you have like a 7-second like computer you're doing your OBS in, or you what is the situation? Or you have to have a really beefcake PC, right? You can actually record multiple streams at once. You can encode multiple streams at once. You can do one recording for yourself. That's a different setting, and you can do a Twitch live feed. That's a different setting. So one use case for this is if you really want a high quality VOD, like a super high quality VOD for like editing video or something, you can do that. But you'll require quite a bit of CPU resources to do this. Either CPU or GPU resources. Like you need quite a bit of resources to be able to do a different encoder for your recording versus your stream. I've done that before. I tried it out before. It was really heavy. All right, we're just over 2 hours. I think that's a good time to end this seminar. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you learned something today. I hope it was very helpful. Bye bye.